Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jaya and I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday on bookish related content. And so I wanted to go back to a tried and true video today where we do a series review. It's reading time here at J-Bay's Corner. Now, these particular books that I have to talk about are actually books that I discovered on Book of the Month, which I do not have any kind of sponsorship from them for, but I absolutely love their service because they curate all the new books that are releasing that month and basically allow me to explore new authors and get into new titles, which is just so much fun. And so that's actually how I found this particular duology that we will be reviewing today. And one of the books released in 2023, the other one came out in 2024. So I felt like it was only fair to dive into these two books. This past month has been a primarily any kind of mythology inspired reading time period. So it's been very Greek focused. There was a little bit of King Arthur vibes in there. And then this particular duology is Egyptian in terms of the setting and the exploration of themes within the books itself. What I will say before I get into this though is I don't think that this was my favorite series by far, but I do want to just go on before I even say anything else about the plotline or the books themselves. I want to be on the record saying that the author's writing was beautiful. I genuinely enjoyed the way she does her prose. I genuinely enjoyed the way she did character development in the first book. I really enjoyed the banter in the first book between the love interests, and I really enjoyed the plotline that was being weaved in, I would say, the first 85% of the first book. And then things kind of derailed from there. So we'll get into that shortly. But the books that I will be talking about today is What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez and Where the Library Hides. So if you guys are interested in talking all things fiction, then you're definitely in the right place. So we will jump into these reviews. Before I get into that, for those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. Thank you so much for hanging out with me wherever you are, whether it's morning, evening, or night. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. And for those of you that are returning, thank you so much for building this bookish community with me. It means the world to me to be able to share all of this joy and love for reading with such a wonderful community. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here and being so supportive. With that being said, let's jump into the reviews. So this first book here, What the River Knows, is, I think, a great segue for the series. And I think there was a lot that was done in this book which were positives. However, there were also things that happened in this book that I think kind of derailed the plotline a little bit for me and took away from the overall enjoyment of the book for me. So I will go on with the review of the book itself, but I just want to preface it by saying this was a solid 3-star read for me. Before we get into the second book, I do also want to just preface that by saying this is a 2-star read for me. Now, that being said, before we start talking about the second book, I do have to reveal some spoilers from the first book in order to finish a discussion about the second book, and just to clarify why I was a little bit more frustrated with the second book in this series. So that being said, I will definitely give a note that spoilers are going to start in this video itself before we jump into the details of the ending of the first book, as well as the review of the second book. So if you do need to hop off the video, that would be the best time to do it. That being said, let's jump into this one. So this story is basically following a young female named Inez, or Oliveira, and she is essentially very fiery, very spirited character. She's very, very fiercely independent, and she's living in a man's world. So this book is set in the 1800s, where women don't really have that many rights to property, to decision making, to money. And so she's very much she's a caged bird. She wants to get out, she wants to fly, but she's unable to do so. She's currently growing up in the care of her aunt, and her cousins are there with her as well. She's very close to one of her cousins, and then her other cousin is actually a little bit scary for her, and she's a little bit older, but they have a good family dynamic overall. At this point, Inez is coming of age where it's about time that she needs to settle down, she needs to meet someone, and so she's a little bit stressed out about her aunt's pressure in regards to that. And she's also really frustrated because her mom and dad are out gallivanting across all of Egypt, and basically they have not been home in quite some time. When they do come to visit, it's only for maybe like 6-month stretches at a time, and they haven't been very open about what it is that they're doing in Egypt itself. And so Inez has always been very lonely, very lost, and very in need of family appreciation, family love, family acceptance. And all of a sudden, she's been missing her parents and she receives a letter. And she's so excited to read this letter because she really feels like she hasn't talked to her father in so long and she just wants a chance to connect with him and see what's going on. And unfortunately, the letter that arrives actually mentions that both of her parents have passed away. And so now her uncle is her legal guardian and also in charge of all of her finances until the date that she gets married. And she is extremely upset and extremely frustrated. So she decides, against her aunt's knowledge, that she's going to stow away and basically go to Egypt so that she can talk to her uncle and also figure out what it is that happened to her parents. Now, this book does have a little to do with magical realism, and as far as the mythological component of this book, it's based on the story of Cleopatra. So just keep that in mind as we continue talking about this book. So when she arrives to Egypt, she basically meets this man who shows up where she is, saying that he's there on behalf of her uncle, and he has kindly requested that she be returned back to where she come from because Egypt is no place for a young woman. She, meanwhile, decides that she's going to take matters into her own hands, basically absconds and runs away from this man who has basically been sent to take her to her uncle, and basically begins the stories of her adventure. When she was about to run away to Egypt, she had also received a keepsake from her father in the letter that she had received, which was a ring. She had placed this ring on her finger and she immediately felt a connection, a pull of some kind of magic. And basically what that magic was is a connection to Cleopatra. So at this time, she arrives in Egypt and she's basically on a carriage trying to make her way to her uncle and explain the situation and basically control what's happening around her. And her ring gets stolen by an Englishman who shows up in her coach, basically connivingly convinces her to show the ring to him. And he in turn then ends up stealing the ring, and she's just left fuming and upset and frustrated when she shows up with her uncle and this man that he has requested to go take care of her. That man ends up being her love interest. He is a disgraced British officer who is basically then an employee of her uncle to help with the excavations that they are doing of the various hidden tombs of pharaohs and queens of Egypt from the past. So basically, her uncle and his colleagues are basically trying to excavate the findings of Cleopatra's tomb as well as the mummy itself, and they're basically trying to document it without actually doing anything offensive or without actually disturbing the actual gravesite itself, because they want to preserve the history there. And they're trying to do this in secret because the British government as well as the Egyptian government are notorious for smuggling artifacts and selling them and desecrating tombs. And meanwhile, there's also a black market that's happening at the same time. And so they're basically just trying to have all of this archaeological evidence of everything that they've excavated without actually letting it go public, so that the findings remain hidden and all of these tombs are protected for as long as possible. So that is what the goals of the company is. Meanwhile, Inez feels a little bit estranged from her uncle because he's not exactly being the warmest when she arrives, and he won't give her any clear-cut answers on what happened to his sister, aka her mother, or his brother-in-law. And while all of this is taking place, Inez happens to basically do her own sleuthing, especially when she stows away onto the boat that her uncle's on, and ends up discovering letters from her mother that are basically stating that he is potentially at large for what happened. So now you have a lot of crazy things that are ending up happening. And in the midst of all of this, she's also exposed to Cleopatra's tomb and the gravesite and all these other things. So that's the basic gist of this book for, I would say, the first 80% of the book. At this point, I won't give spoilers yet. So basically, at that point, first 80% of the book, you just have story, you have a lot of character development, you have a lot of growth from both characters' perspectives, both Whitford and Inez. They are the main couple in this book. You also get to see a little bit more communication, barriers being broken down between Inez and her uncle, and all these other things. But the thing that really irritated me about this book is the last 20% of this book, which I would say was probably around 50 pages max in a 399 page book. The irritating part of this book is things happened at a whirlwind pace in those last few pages, and a lot of the things that happened didn't quite make sense. We had kidnappings, we had murders, we had all kinds of things that were happening at the end of this book that just left you reeling. So it was a lot of cliffhangers that you end up with, a lot of question marks that are on your mind, a lot of frustration for our main character as well as for the readers that make you really, really think that you're gonna love the second book in the series. But at the same time, I just think that for me, the reason this book didn't hit is because overall, I felt like the pacing was very off in this book. I also really, really struggled with appreciating our main female lead character because she's a little bit reckless. She's a very selfish character. She only cares about herself. She keeps a lot of things hidden. She's easily angered, easily frustrated, makes very poor decisions because of miscommunication tropes. And that to me is extremely frustrating. And then our main male lead character, he's very much that like British behavior where it's like you don't really get to know what his emotions are, but we get perspectives from him. And in those perspectives, you get a little bit of his thoughts in terms of the plot point of the book, but you don't get much in terms of the banter, the actual feelings he has towards our main female lead character, things like that. So their budding romance is really hard to fully jump into, which I think was something that was frustrating to me. So overall, I gave this book a 3-star for that reason. I do think the writing was lovely. I do think that the story was fun up until the last 20% when things just went haywire and insane to me. But I would say overall, it was a relatively enjoyable book. And I definitely think it's worth picking up and perusing if you want something that's entertaining, is fast-paced, and you are willing to suspend reasonable logic at the end of the book. Then I think this is something that's definitely worth considering. At this point, I would recommend getting off the video if you don't want to deal with any spoilers, because we are heading into spoiler territory at this point. So I think the things that started to bother me in this book is basically everything that happens at the end. I don't understand how her cousin managed to travel all the way to Egypt on her own, but also is so stupid that she gets into a carriage with an unknown man and finds herself kidnapped when she knows that things are dire in Egypt because literally her cousin is trying to get her to go home. Very confusing to me. The mom basically offering Inez up as bait and setting her cousin up to take the fall, that was also very strange to me. It didn't make any sense. And I just felt like the speed at which things happened in this book were very confusing to me. And I really can't respect Inez's character because I feel like there was no reason for her to go rushing in without thinking. And the fact that she basically led to her uncle's jailing and all these other things was extremely frustrating. Basically, the last 20% of this book made no sense to me, and that's, I think, why I was a little bit frustrated. But at the end of the day, I was hoping that we would get more resolution about Inez's mom and potentially even more details on, what happened to her dad and all these other things. So I was relatively interested in reading the second book, but I just felt like there were a lot of loopholes and a lot that happened in the last, 15 to 20% of the book that just made no sense to me. That is why this is a 3-star book. Moving into this one, though, I think this book just pissed me off. Like, straight up, I was angry from the beginning to the end of this book. I think Inez's and Whitford's wedding was absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that as readers, after the betrayal that Whitford does to Inez with stealing all of her inheritance, we are supposedly supposed to forgive him and allow him into her life because he supposedly loves her, and that too only when they're about to face certain death. That made no sense to me. I think the other thing that was extremely frustrating was how much miscommunication happened between the two of them through the course of this book, because neither one of them could actually talk about their feelings, which I think was extremely unnecessary. So I think as far as enemies to lovers go, I saw the enemies to lovers potential in the first book, but I felt like it was lovers to enemies in the second book, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to believe lovers again. And I think that was really frustrating. And Inez making up completely ridiculous reasons as to why Whit is okay behaving the way he behaved was also extremely frustrating. I also think that once we found out that Inez's mother is basically the culprit behind everything that's gone wrong in the first book, that she once again, doesn't use her uncle as a resource, basically leaves him behind and doesn't communicate with him at all, and decides to go on this insane adventure on her own with no money, no means of any kind, basically listening to a supposed sister who shows up and says, hey, I'm going to betray my mom and your mom and my dad because I Now Choose You was also very interesting. The same character who spent the majority of the previous book saying, you shouldn't trust so easily and you shouldn't trust me. I think that was a very, very, very interesting book. And I think you also got to see the side of Isadora where she clearly does not like Inez and she's clearly plotting her demise. In the first book, when they go out shooting, and there's a moment where Inez's spidey sense was literally like, hey, this girl might actually kill me. Like, listen to your spidey senses. What are you doing? And the fact that she's reeling from the fact that everyone in her family is mad at her and all of the elders in her family have basically forsaken her, the answer is not to go running into the hands of some stranger trying to create family with them. I just don't. I can understand why she's so broken where it leads to that happening, but I just felt like it was such a degenerative movement of the character that it was really hard for me to root for the main character because I felt like she was just acting very ridiculous throughout the course of this book. So that being aside, I think the other thing about this book that was really frustrating is the reveal of Inez's father and who he is, and the fact that he's basically the criminal mastermind of this entire book. Also, the timelines I think just don't make sense. How could Inez's mom have had a secret family and an affair for 19 years and a whole other daughter who's so close to Inez's age? Doesn't make sense. I also think that the plot line was very skewed. I think the magic didn't make much sense to me. The memories that she keeps finding herself in didn't make sense to me because in the previous book, the magic touched moments only really happened when she was exposed to something of Cleopatra's or near something of Cleopatra's. I feel like in this book, it just randomly kept coming up as like quote unquote dreams or memories that she was having, which I just didn't understand how that was happening. In general, was just very confused by this book. I also don't understand how one family of characters could be so terrible in the course of this book. The very end of the book also, the fact that Inez's mother still won't tell her daughter that, hey, I love you, or have any remorse for the choices that she made is extremely frustrating to me. Like, she should have known that her other daughter went to hunt Inez. Like, she should have known. How do you not know that when literally they're the ones that sent her? It's just insane to me. It's just absolutely insane. I have no sympathy for Inez's mother's character. I have no sympathy for Inez's father's character. I honestly don't even have sympathy for her uncle or her aunt. And quite frankly, I don't like Inez. So I felt like this book was a hardcore 2-star read for me. I also felt like the plot line was a little ridiculous. And again, the fact that everything happened in the last 20% of the book, finding of Alexandria, figuring out what happened to her dad, everything that happened down in the tunnels, her father holding her at gunpoint at one point, like it was the standoff between her mom and her dad and her being caught in the middle. The fact that she just so willingly forgives Whitford only because he happened to save her life. The ink that saves Whitford's life. There's just, it's too many things that happened too quickly, and I feel like it just didn't make any sense for me. So that is why this is a 2-star read. I did enjoy the first half of the book, I guess, when we were kind of talking about the wedding planning happening and we were talking about, you know, his perspective a little bit at least, and we got to see some of his like relations with his brother, and you kind of saw that side of him where he feels a sense of duty towards his family. This is Wit, by the way. But you don't really get to see like emotions necessarily from him. I think that was interesting. But again, I think Whitford's chapters were very poorly used in this book because most of the time he's just talking about how his quote-unquote wife is like reckless and doesn't think, and how she keeps agitating him, and he takes it very seriously to protect her, but more for his self-interest than the fact that he actually cares about her. So all of the love proclamations, all the things that happen at the end of this book, I just don't think make any sense at all. The only scene in this book that I think was very, very moving for me and special for me was the very, very, very end of the book when they're having the family dinner and the epilogue and you see everybody together. That was kind of sweet, and I did like the fact that they used the cornucopia at the end of the book to actually create the basil leaf of gold. I think that was kind of interesting, and I do like the fact that they have their 2 cats that are running around and all that kind of stuff. But I do feel like overall this book was extremely disappointing, and that was really sad because I had high hopes for this book. I was really walking into it thinking it was going to be a 4-star read. So the fact that it dropped down to a 2 was a little bit hard for me. I still maintain that Isabel has a phenomenal penmanship. Like, she writes beautifully. I think Her words are beautiful. The way she writes her story is beautiful. The prose is beautiful. It's just that I didn't like the story. So that was the unfortunate thing. Again, I know this is a little bit more on the sad, scathing side, which I do apologize for, because I don't believe in, telling anyone that their work is poor. And I don't think that that necessarily means this book won't be a fun read for someone else. I just felt like there were too many loopholes and too many confusing plot moments for me personally to get fully into this book. But that does conclude my review of these two books. So this was a 3, this was a 2, and this was the duology that was completed for What the River Knows and Where the Library Hides. Wherever you are, morning, evening, or night, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope that this review didn't unfortunately affect you negatively in any way, shape, or form. Again, I think the beauty of books is that just because I didn't like it doesn't mean that someone else can't like it. And I also think that every author who's able to create a piece of art like this is still phenomenal, because if I was tasked with the job of writing a book, I would not succeed. I would not succeed. I've tried, I've failed multiple times. Ever since I was 12 years old, I've wanted to write a novel, and it's never happened. So, I have the utmost respect for all authors, especially when they go through the publication process and they're releasing such amazing stories that are unique to them. I just feel like this wasn't the right fit for me. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. For those of you that are new, if you like bookish related content and you want to hear more reviews, or you want to follow along for, the TBRs and the reading wrap-ups and all that kind of stuff, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday on primarily bookish related content, with a little smattering of randomness here and there. Randomness being mostly trips for the most part, or celebrations and things like that I just think are fun and happy and enjoyable to share. For those of you that are returning, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you creating this community with me. It has been an absolute joy and honor to be able to talk books with everybody, and I thank you again for being here to watch these videos. Please do leave comments below. I love reading them. I love responding to them. I would love to know your thoughts on these books if you've read them before, whether they're on your TBR, whether you're excited for them. So yeah, definitely let me know what you think, and I will catch you guys on the next video, and I can't wait to talk more books. Bye guys.